We're actually seeing a virtual stoppage, a virtual slowdown of growth in greenhouse gas emissions in this country while our economy is growing. The Commissioner's report was not based on this set of data. It was based on 2 years prior data.
All right, the federal government's already under fire for its plan to fast-track the environmental assessment process. The opposition is taking fire at them. Today, a new report from Canada's environmental watchdog added more fuel to that fire. The Environment Commissioner, Scott Vaughn, he says the government is not on track to meet the 2020 climate change targets that they themselves set. They're also not on target to clean up toxic sites across the country. Now, the government's pushed back. You just heard Michelle Rempel, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment, on this program saying Mr. Vaughn's report is based on outdated data. Minister Kent in the House said the same thing. The guy missed the numbers, he said. So is the government really on track to meet its environmental obligations? Is it investing enough money to clean up toxic sites? Let's get some details from Canada's Environment Commissioner, Scott Vaughn. He joins me now. Mr. Vaughn, good to have you. You say in your report Canada's emissions will be 7% above 2005 levels, not 17% below, as the government stipulates. So is the government on track to meet its own carbon emissions targets? Yes or no?
No. So, I mean, I think what we've said, Evan, is, the 7% above is not our figures, it's Environment Canada's figures. And what they've said is based on what they know today, the emissions keep going to go up. And so the real target that the government is looking at from now to 2020 is up around 180 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And we've said right now there's not enough measures in place. There's not enough time to put in all the measures that they've said they're going to do, but there's no details. So we've said they're not going to get there in all likelihood. They're
not going to get it. Of course, they push back. You hear the Minister of the Environment and Michelle Rempel said, well, unfortunately, you, Mr. Vaughn, didn't use up-to-date numbers. You're 2 years out of date. The latest figures show that, in fact, there's been a reduction. And if you'd use the right numbers, you'd see we are on track. Your response?
Well, my response is we're in the Office of the Auditor General. I work with people who look at numbers all the time, and I can tell you the Auditor General's office doesn't miss numbers or get numbers wrong. The numbers that we looked at when we went to press was the most recent report which was available. Since then, there's been a new report in April, which the Minister noted today. Of course, we've seen it, but what that report shows is there's been an increase in emissions over the last period by 2 million tons. So, flattening out rising by a little less is very different from saying you're going down. And so thus far, we haven't seen it going down.
So you're saying when they say your numbers were from a 2009 emissions report, and therefore you're speculative, you're saying it's actually gotten worse?
It's the number since from the last report to the most recent from the report the minister. It's gotten worse. The emissions have increased by 2 million tons. So I mean, and the point is they haven't increased as a percentage as much as the Canadian economy has made. But I mean, these numbers are confusing. The real number is there's a target of 178 million tons. Of all the regulations that are in place today, you add them all up, it's 11 to 13 million tons. So federal government's plan right now, 11 to 13 million of regulations in place. 178 is our target, and we've said probably not enough measures, not enough time.
I mean, that's not even missing it by a little. That's a mile wide.
Well, and I think what the minister has said is if you add everything up that's around now, from the federal government, from the provincial government, from everything together, they'll get to 1/4 of that by the year 2020. So the question, Evan, is, where's the other 75%? And that's why we're saying, look, right now, we probably don't think they're going to get there.
Well, you say, where's the other 75%? He says, well, hang on. We're rolling out our sector-by-sector details to curtail carbon sector by sector. We've done it before. And he said very explicitly, once we do, you will see, we will hit our targets by 2020. What's your view on that?
I hope I'm wrong. I very much hope that when everything is rolled out, when all the emission regulations are rolled out, that they do get the target. And the reason I hope that is because climate change is a real issue. It's a real issue that's affecting Canadians now in terms of increased droughts, increased heat waves, and in storms we've seen in the Maritimes last year, in melting permafrost in northern Canada. So, I certainly hope they're going to meet that target.
But right now, how do we measure this?
Well, how you measure it is we'll know in 2020. One reference and one reason for looking at the past is from the Kyoto period, what we do know is Canada has missed that target by around 800 million tons for the 5-year Kyoto period. So, this is difficult to do, but, these regulations take 4 or 5 years to put in place. And as I said, 2 regulations are in place now. There is an approach moving forward, but, the proof's in the pudding on this one.
Now, the other big question is the government said we're not going to do Kyoto because it costs too much, it would hurt the economy, so we have a more efficient plan. Is there a good way to measure the cost of their plan?
And that's one of the things we've also said today. So we've said, the government has said in the past Kyoto would be way too expensive for the Canadian economy. So we've said, well, let's see your cost estimates for the new plan. This is your plan for 2020. How much is it going to cost Canadians and the Canadian economy? And we've reported to Parliament today there is no cost estimate for the 2020 plan.
If you were to grade this plan, A being a great plan, F being a failed plan, what grade would you give their plan to meet their targets?
Evan, I avoid grades, but what I would say is, just say again, it's unlikely, based on what we've seen now, based on everything we know, that they're going to get to the 2020 target.
Your report also talks about cleaning up contaminated sites. You say it will cost $7.7 billion to clean up, but you also say that they're about in the fund, and this goes back not just to this government, but to other governments, they're $500 million short. Can you explain what kind of contaminated sites, and for Canadians watching, how that may affect their health and safety?
Yeah, so these are, there are 22,000 contaminated sites across this country. They're, here in Ottawa, there's over 160. They're in every major city in the country. They're across the country on First Nation reserves, thousands, and they're contaminated with all sorts of materials, with petroleum products, it spills from diesel fuels, but also some nasty stuff, PCBs and dioxins and benzene, radioactive waste in Port Hope in Ontario, and up in Giant Mine in the Northwest Territories, over 200,000 tons of arsenic trioxide, and a tiny little piece of that, portion of that is poisonous to human health. So this is literally across the country, and large and small.
You think they need more money allocated to clean that stuff up?
Well, what we said is that, looking at the budget that they've had now, they've put aside, billions of dollars to clean up, but based on their own statement of their own liabilities, they come short $500 million.
A very interesting report today. We've talked a lot about various environment issues. And this is the latest one from the Environment Commissioner, Scott Vaughn. This spring report, remember, comes out of the Auditor General's office. Scott Vaughn, always good to have you on the program.
Likewise.
I appreciate that.